So looking at the patterns in a correlation between obesity and micronutrient deficiency or overconsumption, I think in order to break the shell, the easiest way for me to approach the topic was by looking at data and seeing specific trends or population changes in terms of obesity. And we saw a change in the 1930s, we saw a change significantly in the 1970s, and then we still see a pattern of increase in the 2000s. So looking at these different pattern changes was my easiest perspective and easiest approach to understanding what correlating factors as far as micronutrients and food changes affected obesity rates. So that leads me right into the first micronutrient that popped out the most to me, and it definitely interlinks with these trends that we saw. That's vitamin B is my first answer for the micronutrient that is most relevant to causality of obesity. I only say this with so much confidence because I look at it through global food systems. When I think about the food fortification changes that we've made, whether it's laws, regulations, new programs that we put into effect, you definitely see a significant change, not only in the United States, but also in countries that later on applied food fortification. If you think about ready-to-eat cereals, vitamin B1, B2, B6, niacin, these are all additional vitamins that are added on to these ready-to-eat cereals to help population with any deficiency that we were seeing before. But we're at such a high level that a quarter-pound bowl of that ready-to-eat cereal puts you at your daily value as an adult. Take that a step further. If you think about baby formula or infant formula that we're seeing today, it's 20 times the concentration of the vitamins that we would get from human milk. So I think from a stretching the vitamin content perspective, I definitely think vitamin B has that effect. So if you think about vitamin B, vitamin B6, B1, they're required for synthesis of fat from carbohydrates and protein, and their effects on fat synthesis are enhanced by presence of other B vitamins. So as we look at the overload that we're doing, to an extent, it's great to meet those needs. I think we've taken fortification to such an extent where the overconsumption is causing the issues that we're seeing that trend into obesity. Take a look at some of the research that I'll attach. It's countries like Saudi Arabia, countries like Denmark, Netherlands, they've done the research as food fortification was going into play. Childhood obesity rates went from 3.5% to 24.5%. That's a huge incline in change. It's a huge incline in change for sure. I mean, you're seeing the B vitamins, like we said, promote more fat synthesis from carbohydrates. So the cooperation of increased glucose uptake in the body in the hypoglycemic phase and increased fat synthesis by the levels of B vitamins might induce excess fat storage. The excess of things are what we're trying to cover here, and that's what we've talked about leading into this topic. I definitely think the excess storage of the vitamins, which leads into the excess fat storage, is subsequent in the obese prevalence that we're talking about here. Among the B vitamins, fortification of niacin, as we said with the ready-to-eat cereals, I think it definitely induces insulin resistance and glucose intolerance in heavy consumers as well. So that is definitely a factor that we're kind of taking into consideration as to why we can say that vitamin B consumption as a trending pattern of heavier and heavier consumption in concentration is a key player in obesity prevalence spiking throughout the years. All right, when it comes to micronutrient deficiency linking to obesity, the second one I want to look at is vitamin D. We know that we supplement with vitamin D to improve glucose metabolism and insulin signaling, especially in those suffering from type 2 diabetes. So I think kind of as a spin-off of that, in a society with such high carb consumption, I think the deficiency is a big key player in not so much the direct causality, but more so the contribution to seeing population of obese clients on the rise. We know that diet, blood sugar, and time spent outdoors all play a role in body weight. But I definitely think a low consumption or deficiency in vitamin D is prevalent. I mean, we look at numbers of deficiency of vitamin D in obese patients right now, in obese populations, and we're between 80 to 90%. So the link is there. It's just a matter of what progression do we see with insufficiency, and then insufficiency as obesity arises. All right, the third one, last but not least, I think it's an answer we're going to be hearing quite often. I think iron plays a huge part in the correlation between obesity and micronutrient deficiencies or overconsumptions. We know that iron is vital for correct cell functioning. We know it helps create hormones. We know it has interlinked with multiple studies or situations that we've seen before as far as diagnosis for anemia, fatigue, just different cases that we see iron deficiency. If a person has low iron levels, they're not sending enough oxygen to their muscles. So muscles that are low in oxygen can't burn fat as a fuel. It also interferes with optimum metabolism in the body. So I definitely think that iron deficiency and anemia impair mitochondrial and cellular energy homeostasis. It definitely increases activity and fatigue in obese patients. So again, going back to that wheel, I think when it comes to iron, it's such a big circle of reactions that play out throughout. So I think, when there are low iron levels, we definitely see a decrease in fat metabolism, which circles back around to the fatigue and the impaired mitochondrial and cellular energy, which is going to circle right back to the causality aspect of iron deficient patients linking into perhaps anemia or obesity, or even interlinked with diabetes.
All right, we have Josette Curtis on the line, registered dietitian.
So when you first asked this question, I took the tack of, I don't think there is one specific answer, but I looked at it from a perspective of how diabetes and obesity are interrelated.
Absolutely.
And two micronutrients that have been shown to be useful, like complementary or adjuvant therapies for treatment of diabetes, are chromium and biotin, both of which play key roles in just various carbohydrate metabolism pathways or enhancing cellular regulation of insulin receptors and downregulating cellular expression of enzymes that reduce insulin sensitivity. And we know that certainly, I'm not suggesting that everyone with obesity has a form of diabetes or everyone with a form of diabetes is obese.
Yep.
But, we both know that they frequently appear in concert. And so for individuals with obesity and diabetes, it may be a factor of they are deficient in chromium and or biotin, or it could be that supplementing those to make sure that they are replete with either or both of those nutrients could enhance their insulin sensitivity, and then by extension make their efforts at combating obesity a little bit more effective.
Absolutely, yeah. And I love how you connected the metabolism piece in there too. I mean, that when I looked at vitamin B for my research, when I was looking at niacin, it was just, we know that, vitamin B is in charge of fat metabolism for carbohydrates and protein. But when we're overloading on such a high level, are we really doing good, or are we doing harm at that point? And it's just, the taxing effect, the sensitivities it's causing, just the stress that it's putting on the body. It's definitely, it like I said in the initial post, it's like a two-ended question, where you have the overload that we're getting, as I said to you, with fortified foods and everything, but then we have the deficiency that there's a lot of missed pieces that link to that prevalence of connection between obesity and diabetes, like you said. So.
For sure.
Yeah. All right. That's awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
We have Kevin Haynes, PharmD, on the line. Kev, I know you have some fun input on the question of micronutrient deficiency in relation to obesity. So let's hear what you got.
Awesome. So, micronutrient deficiency and how it relates to I guess the weight gain over time. I think it was mentioned that correlates to maybe like 60 years ago, how we we're eating a lot more micronutrients now. And then if I was hearing that correctly, we were eating more micronutrients now than in the past, and you're relating that towards weight gain a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's definitely, I mean, more so the food fortification aspect of it. Not necessarily eating more of those micronutrients, but I think in terms of at least vitamin B, when I talk about B1, B6, and niacin, I think it's a matter of the concentration within the food that we're consuming. I think it's definitely safe to say that we're consuming a lot more caloric intake now than we were as population has been progressing. But the way I talked about it was definitely the higher concentration that's within the individual items that we're eating. It's definitely spiked significantly. And I think that, in my opinion, there's a significant correlation of that when I talked about, the ready-to-eat cereals going from childhood obesity from 3.5% to 24.5%, just with that Fortification Act moving forward. So.
Okay, yeah, and kind of, I guess my standpoint on that, in that relation, it's kind of hard to make that kind of connection because there's a lot of things 60 years ago that may have changed or may have had a difference. And then relating that towards where we are now, we can also take into other like maybe socioeconomic things, political things, and we can also try to make that stretch because we were here and now we're here, and then whatever happened in between, we could blame it on that. More sugar, less sugar, and we can also say it's that. Just like in research, how some research studies are going to be, okay, we had this large group of people, the people that ate 2 meals a day, they lost more weight than the people who ate 8 meals a day. Is that because the 2 meals a day did anything versus the 8 meals? Probably. I think as far as I've read, probably not. But still, we can kind of highlight that relationship and then kind of pull things from there. But it doesn't always mean that there is something. Sometimes we're just grabbing at straws. But there definitely is going to be some play with micronutrients and metabolism and how it can go up and down. Kind of also I would relate it to, for laymen, just regular people who want to lose weight, you're going to want to focus on the thing that actually gets you to lose weight, and that's going to be calories. Regardless of your micronutrients, probably if you are super deficient or if you are having a ton of vegetables, you're still going to have to reach that calorie restriction, that calorie deficit. So I think for most people, that's what they're going to want to focus on. For the context of this, doesn't really matter. I would probably also relate it to if a bodybuilder or someone who wants to gain muscle is having 3 meals, 3 protein feedings, hitting that leucine threshold 3 times versus 5 times, someone who's really, really trying to optimize, really, really cares, is really going to want that 1% to 2%. As opposed to, most people don't have to worry about getting their 3 versus 5 meals because maybe they don't have that thirst for getting that one little bit of increase in muscle for that kind of nuisance that they have to focus on. Kind of like in here, I think for the context of like research, it's really good to look into these things and see if we get that difference, that 1% of metabolism from getting more vitamin D, more B12 versus not. And I think that that's kind of something to look at, but I think going into the real world, it's probably not going to have too much merit in terms of what we should tell people to focus on. So if someone wants to lose weight, I'm not going to say, hey, your vitamin B12 is everything, really get that up. And that's the 1%, as opposed to I'd be like, hey, check your calories, see if you're eating 4,000 and let's make sure you're not. And then we're going to get you from there. Let's focus on the controllable thing. That's going to get us the outcomes most people are looking at. Another thing that I really want to bring into this whole topic that I think is very, very important is the foods that are very micronutrient dense, aside from the fortified foods that were mentioned. It's typically going to be your fruits and vegetables. And the good thing about fruits and vegetables, they have a lot of fiber, very satiating, high water content. Water has no calories and it's a good amount of volume. They're crunchy. And also, again, that high volume. So all these kinds of things, it's going to help stretch your stomach. And then fiber also has its own satiety effect. Those are all going to make you feel very full. And then also they have those micronutrients associated with them. So these people that are eating more vegetables, more fruits, they're second-handedly going to eat less calories because they're so satiated from these kinds of high micronutrient density foods, because these high micronutrient density foods also come along with these other fun things added. Again, that volume, the water content, the crunchiness. I think I mentioned the fiber. So yesterday I was at Cheesecake Factory. I had 2 meals side by side, both I think on their #SkinnyLicious menu. there were 600 calories, but one was the size of my fist. The other one was like the size of, I think like 8 of my fist. One was a salad, and then one was just like pasta and like shrimp. And like, I think it was like garlic sauce, so butter. So with those things, like there's so much more micronutrients in that salad. But is that why I would lose weight eating just those foods? And I would have to argue no. It's because the volume of those foods, the satiety that I'm going to feel, it's not going to allow me to eat as much more. I could have gone and got 3 helpings of that lower volume food, just like a Pop-Tart. It's pretty void in micronutrients. It's very small. It's not going to satiate you. Or if you go get a couple apples. So I think with those things being considered as well, and then also in kind of what is available to us readily right now, there's all these very palatable foods that are micronutrient void. So Pop-Tarts, we got our tasty cakes. People are going towards those more so now. And so I would less say that it's the absence of micronutrients, but these highly palatable things that aren't very filling, not very satiating, versus those high micronutrient foods, just kind of on the side, they're very filling, very satiating, water content, fiber content, those kinds of things. I think that that's, in my opinion, from what I've read, I think that's the biggest contributing factor. And the reason why we may see now people with more micronutrients in their diet are going to be leaner, healthier individuals. I'd say that it's mainly because of the satiety that's associated with those foods predominantly.
Absolutely, man. We got Mike Alessi from Stronger You.
So I would say, and this is only because of some of the research I've done on my own, but I know vitamin D, I think is a big contributor to obesity, or at least it's found with obese patients. Iron, I think that there's, because of the high energy dense food, but low nutrient dense food is causing malnutrition, things like that. So iron, protein are probably pretty low.
Absolutely.
Causing,
I think a lot of the anemia cases that we see with obesity, whether it's prevalent in obese patients or leading into obesity, I think definitely iron plays a key role as well.
And then the third, I struggled thinking a little bit with, but I've come up with calcium too.
Okay.
And I think probably along the same lines as iron and the anemia problem and everything. I think that they're probably not getting high nutrient dense foods, and calcium would probably be deficient in, and actually probably, I don't know if it causes obesity. I'm having a hard time linking that, but that was the third that I kind of came up with off the top of my head.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just as a recap, when we talked about it prior to getting on a call, we both had that same question of, is it a matter of these, micronutrients causing obesity, or is it that we notice this stuff, surfacing in patients that we've already labeled as obese? And you brought up an awesome question as far as, are there relevant micronutrient deficiencies, that force individuals to, overconsume certain micronutrients or certain foods that cause obesity, which was a really good spin-off on it. Because, when I thought about it, when I mentioned to a lot of people around me within the nutrition industry, I said, hey, you ever think about it from a perspective that, somebody is certain micronutrient or certain, vitamin deficient, which causes them to overconsume just to make up that deficit? Could that be a cause to the obesity aspect of it too? So that was an awesome twist on the question.
Yeah, no, I just always, after I thought about it, I was just wondering, like, if they're born with predisposed micronutrient deficiencies in certain ones, I guess, and would their biological transmitters, whatever you're going to call them, like force them to try to go seek sufficiency in those things? So
absolutely. All right. Well, thank you for answering that.
That's awesome. Cool. All right.